Well, speaking of my show, I was all over another show again this week, and it's the season finale, or it was the season finale of Dark Side of the Ring for this season on Vice TV with the topic of he'll always be Mark Magnus to me, but Muhammad Hassan, the ill-fated experiment where Vince was trying to recreate his Iron Sheik fantasies or whatever. But this one, thankfully, and this was I think the way to end the season, because it wasn't a story about a guy who had tragedy happen to him, made the wrong decisions, ill health, financial ruin, whatever the fuck. But at the same time, it was his career got ruined, but there was a positive ending and a resolution to the thing, is that he had another career and he's done just fine. But this one showed, I think, better than anything we've seen on television in a while, how stubborn and insistent Vince McMahon was when he wanted to do something, and how that he would just not stop fucking with it until he finally went too far. Do you think that was the overriding theme of the whole thing, even though it was poor Mark Magnus that was at the center of it?
I thought the overriding theme was that Gene Snitsky seems like a cool guy.
He is, for a baby killer. He's a heck of a dog. Ask him and he'll tell you, because he was in OVW for a while. I made him Mike Mondo's brother because they looked like Mean Gene Mondo. One guy was the smallest guy in the company. The other guy was the biggest. But he came back because he was still living in Louisville after he'd done that thing where he supposedly punted the baby across the building. He came back in the Davis Arena, and I said, get the fuck out of here. I don't want people to see you coming here. You're a fucking baby killer. Hated that angle. Loved Gene Snitsky, though. But, and really, this one was, they didn't have every, goddamn famous talking head individual contributing something. It was down to people that were involved in Mark's career and his friends of Chris Masters and Snitsky and Maven. They had John Pollock as a journalist, and Michael Leonardi apparently was one of the writers that was involved at the time in this or at the WWE. And I've never heard his fucking name, but I believe it because there was like hundreds of them. But I thought more highly of Mark Magnus all around in OVW than a lot of the guys, because he had a little bit of everything. Because some of the guys took to the work more quickly, but not the talk, or sometimes the other way around, or sometimes a guy could work and talk, but boy, if he just looked a little better physically. And Mark wasn't a giant, but he had a great physique. He had a great attitude, wanted to learn, coachable. His work came along quick. His promos came along quick. This Mark Magnus at OVW was the kind of a guy that you would give the Daniel Garcia or Wheeler Yuta push to. Then instead of a guy with none of the tools, you find a guy with all of the tools, but you don't push him down people's throats from the start. You give him the same amount of time, but you tell a story from start to finish. What with Mark from I think the tryout camp, first time we saw him, one of the tryout camps. When he comes here, he starts in class because I don't believe he had any training. He starts in class, and then he graduates to he's an underneath preliminary baby face because he's a good looking kid. Why make him a heel right now? He doesn't know what he's doing. And he works the flea market shows, or he works St. Therese Gym, or the small shit that we do. And he get dark match on TV while we're setting the camera angles, and he puts somebody over, or in a tag match just to get him in front of people. And then he started on TV as an underneath preliminary baby face. And then, surprisingly enough, he switched heel and joined the heel group, which already included the top heels in the company. So he's like in the group, he's associating with them, but it's not him. But then as those guys move on or are called up or what, then suddenly he breaks out of the group and becomes a single heel, and he's got the girl Nikita with him. And now he's concentrating on challenging guys like Johnny Jeter for the OVW title, where Jeter was in the same place he was 2 years before. And you could draw the parallel stories of their ascent and how Jeter still was honorable, whereas Magnus had stabbed everybody in the back and blah, blah, blah. But that's the way you brought somebody up from start to, okay, now here's somebody that you can do something with. They've been a baby face and a heel. They have had a couple years of experience. They have been used from the opening of the card all the way to the main event in that environment. And they know the different gradations that takes place. Does this make sense, Brian?
I think so.
So that's what we did with Mark, and he more than carried the ball with everything. And he understood it. And finally, what we had going was with him and Nikita that made a great looking couple, this year's model, Mark Magnus, because it was the striving of everybody who was trying to get the contract and go to Raw. And last year it had been Cena or whoever. Who's it going to be this year? And also the male model thing, because he was gorgeous. And if we were trying to Rick Rude vibes but an updated, younger version of Rick Rude. And I thought since he had done that well in, as I said, I think it was maybe 2 years, a little bit over from start to finish, that certainly they weren't going to call us and tell us to make him a fucking Arab. And that's where they had some nice footage, of his OVW run. They even had a shot of me leveling him with the elbow. We did the Crusade Rumble, I think in 2004 for the Crusade for Children, was me and Johnny Jeter against Magnus and Nikita. And I got 2 punches and the elbow in before they cut me off and beat the shit out of me.
When you say they called and said to make him an Arab, who made the call? How did it go down? I'm trying to think, was Bruce around then? He was generally the one that would call and give me news I didn't want to hear because Johnny Ace didn't want to do it. But it was somebody from the office who we've got the idea. It may have been Laurinaitis himself. We want to make him an Arab, however they phrased it. And I said, he's an Italian from Syracuse. Same thing I said on the Dark Side show. He's an Italian from Syracuse. And he's doing, but what? Well, but we're going to bring in Sean Daivari. Well, I knew Daivari, I think, at that point from Ring of Honor and he was a great kid also. But I was like, here's another time we're going to get somebody doing something in developmental that's natural to them and that they're feeling good at and doing well at, and it change everything after 2 years and fucking 2 months. But that was the thing, is that Vince had the idea. And so he didn't care what anybody else was doing. I want that guy to do that thing. So that's how that came. And then he said, so we're going to send Daivari and, and just make him an Arab. So I had to figure it. So we had, obviously they knew who he was. We had him lose some kind of big milestone, something, I think, disappoint his cohorts. Maybe it was the Revolution, Basham and those guys. And he just walked out of the building and quit wrestling in OVW on TV. Just walked out with his bags on TV, gave us big promo. I let everybody down. I screwed up. I'm done. And then a month later, he came back with Daivari, the rich Middle Easterner that he'd found while he was, depressed and trying to find himself. And he'd given him a new ideology. And that's because how else do we make a fucking Italian guy from Syracuse a Muslim Middle Easterner? And we did the bare stuff with the whole Middle Eastern thing that we could and concentrate on them just trying shit. But the people didn't want to, the fans actually ended up being kind of a cool atmosphere. And they showed a clip of that also. On their own, they decided every time that Mark and Daivari would do a promo, they'd stand up and turn their back to him. And just so the whole crowd would get up, stand up, and turn their back to the ring. And we don't want to hear it, all that shit while they were doing their promo. But it was, again, making the best of a bad situation because they already knew who he was. And this was completely the opposite. So we had to figure out a way to make him that so that then they could try all of their, the prayer rug and the fucking headdress and the goddamn whatever the fuck, right? What are we doing here? Because they did. And that's this writer guy admitted they didn't really know what it was until they started to do vignettes. And that's when they thought, we're going to present him from a sympathetic point. He's an Arab American that's being discriminated against. They came up with that the day they showed up to do the vignettes. All they'd said before was, he's going to be an Arab, but he's got an Arab guy that can speak Farsi. So fucking do shit. And they didn't show, and Brian, I'll let you speak. I don't know, you could have had a small stroke and be unconscious over there.
No, but keep going. This is good.
They didn't have time to put this story in the Dark Side show. But when Daivari got there and they said, okay, they need to dress up and act like a blah, blah, blah. So I said, guys, bring a suit. And he said, well, I don't have a suit. Mark, you got a suit. I ain't got a suit. I had to take him to Men's Warehouse and buy him the fucking suits. I think we talked about this. We had Evan Husney on. But they had come up with the guy was doing well in developmental with what he was doing. The guy had all the potential in the world. They come up with this cockamamie idea on the spur of the moment. And they had to send me money to buy them $2,000 worth of clothes because they had no fucking clothes to look like they had any money. And then they don't know what they're going to do with it till they get there. Then they decide on that thing, which Mark was happy with. And everybody was happy with that, there's truth in this. Put upon, discriminated against Arab American, whatever. And what is it? And it's, not even a year later or whatever, by the time Vince is finished with it, they're beheading people with piano wire. I'm sorry. Give me your thoughts.
I don't know what else to say based on the stuff you're talking about so far. They gave him a big push right out of the gate. He's upset about discrimination, but that made him the heel somehow. The thing with Hogan, I mean, that is a pretty big deal. The idea that he actually got to work with Hogan at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Again, it was old Hogan broken down. That may have been the year. Is that the year Hogan went into the Hall of Fame? It may have been the year Hogan went into the Hall of Fame.
I think it was 2005.
Sure. That may have been the year Hogan went into the Hall of Fame. So it was a big deal. I mean, you haven't talked about yet. I don't know if you're going to, so I'll just bring it up. In terms of him being fired, what could they have done? And did Vince owe him something? I mean, we always say that Vince, at the end of the day, does a boss owe everyone who works for him, whether an employee or an independent contractor? Do they owe them lifetime employment? Do they owe them this and that? In this case, where this guy did nothing wrong, did Vince owe him something or just do something for him? I mean, not have him leave the business and question why he's doing anything.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between lifetime employment and a 2-year-long career. There should be some middle ground in there. And see, that's the thing. Again, it was Vince, and they all said this. It was Vince pushing the deal and making him more of a real terrorist. And Mark said he, registered his, not complaints, but, I can imagine, because he's a nice guy, I can imagine as diplomatic as he could have possibly been to ask Stephanie. And she said, hey, basically, shut up. We know what we're doing. Because she's not the one who got canceled off television. But because he was Vince's pet project, that's why they gave him the push. The match with Hulk Hogan, working with Shawn Michaels, with Undertaker, with all the top guys. And at the same time, it was hard for him in the locker room because he mentioned the wrestler's court story. Because Kurt Angle, he goes up to him and says, hey, you're using a camel clutch, but geez, Eddie Guerrero's using it. Guys, get out of it. You can see they were setting him up. And he'd only been in OVW for 2 years, right? So he couldn't ask every question in the world. If he'd have been in OVW, he probably would have asked me, hey, should this other guy be using the... And I would have, yeah, don't open that can of peas, but they were setting him up to get ribbed. And nobody was shitting in his, his lunchbox or whatever, like has happened in the past. But there was some level of scrutiny and some level of heat on him, and he was going to get ribbed a little bit because coming in with a push like that. But it wasn't, that's the thing, it wasn't like the way that some of the 90s guys treated some of the other underneath guys. There was a little difference there, but they kept pushing the deal on television. And Maven, bless him, doesn't know the difference between money heat and disgusting heat. Because he was like, wow, this guy's going to have so much heat. Wrong kind, especially with the network. So they did the angle with The Undertaker, and then the London terrorist attack happens, and SmackDown is that night, and they still show it, and the bad publicity. And then the writer said he complained to Stephanie about it, and she demoted him. So, boy, they were touchy back then. But Mark basically figured it out that he wasn't going to be long for there when he asked Johnny Ace about, hey, I'm supposed to be buying this house. And Ace said, don't buy the house.
The only time Johnny Ace has ever been a babyface right there.
Yes, the only time he's ever told the truth in his life.
Yeah, because it's gone the other way a lot in wrestling history where guys, especially in territory, should I buy a house? Sure, buy a house. Now you got them.
Yeah, now you got to stay. But in this case, they didn't want him to stay. And they booked him on pay-per-view because the network had said, we don't want this character or whatever on TV anymore. So they booked him on pay-per-view and finished him up, power bombing him through the stage or whatever. But Mark told a story, and it was sad. He was heartbroken because he had done everything they asked him to. And he had been a model, a trainee, developmental employee, student, however you want to phrase it, never got in trouble. And again, something I said for the show they didn't have time for, but I would have fucking paid him for 2 years. Here, we're going to sign you to a new contract for 2 years for a decent amount of money, not millions of dollars. But at the time, developmental guys were getting $1,000 a week, 15 to whatever. Sign him up to come back to developmental and just maybe take a few months off and then come back to developmental and wait for a year and a half or 2 years, then come back clean shaven with longer hair in different outfit. I mean, for God's sake, it's not like people don't know wrestling is fake. And you can't mean to tell me that they've never changed anybody's name that's ever been on television. And you also can't mean to tell me that the network 2 years later would have called and complained if the same guy playing a completely different part, not doing any of those goddamn terrorist things, and he was a baker from the Bronx, showed up, that they would have complained. But instead, I think they sent him back to OVW for I think a couple months. That was right when I had left. So he was, by the time I got them up there, boom, then I'm gone. He comes back for 2 months and then they just dropped him. And it depressed him because of all the sacrifices he's made and the as hard as he had worked. But finally, he realized that he needed to change shit if it wasn't going to work out. And he went back to school and got the teaching certificate and became a principal. And now is the well thought of member of the school district and looks like a normal human being. So, as I said, I think maybe he came out ahead in the long run. But they went too far because Vince didn't have any goddamn restraint. Imagine that. And ruined his career and then made him pay for it for doing what they said to do.
And anyone who spoke up against it was penalized or threatened with being penalized.
Shut the fuck up. We know what we're doing. Of course you do. You're getting heat with your fucking television network.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I agree with you. I think it sucks that it all happened that way. There's a lot of big what ifs. But in the end, for him, it seems like it was the best thing. He has a family. He's got a secure job, I would guess. A pension. Maybe a union, who knows? But he doesn't have to worry about a lot of the things that a lot of the wrestlers have to worry. He doesn't have to rush to a convention or anything. He's kind of got his life together, like Tito Santana. Went and became a teacher. And he was, had something secure for a lot of the time. He retired now and probably got a nice pension. Everything else.
Well, and Mark also, he doesn't have headaches or concussion syndrome or, bad hips or knees or whatever, or neck. And, he was never going to be the WWF champion. And I'm not insulting him by saying that. He was not going to be that guy, the guy. But he was just equally as talented as a number of people who made a decent amount of money in a fairly short period of time during some of that era if he'd have gotten the opportunity. But otherwise, for long term, I think we're both right. He'd probably be better off in school with those children instead of some of the children that he would have been working with otherwise.
So you had two unique opportunities to rebook him if you had been there when he came back, because obviously he left one day and he came back and he had found a new ideology. Now he can come back and either he drops that ideology completely and apologizes to the fans and says he'll go back to being who he really is. He's a young guy going through a lot. Or he finds a new ideology, and that's his new gimmick now. He comes in and now I'm a guru, now I'm this or that. Now I'm a Buddhist monk. But what would you do? I mean, like you said, I don't think it shouldn't be that there was no way to rehabilitate the wrestler with a new gimmick, even if the gimmick didn't ignore the fact that he had been Muhammad Hassan.
Again, for the sake of the OVW universe, which was small in the overall scheme of things, but on our television and our program, I think if they'd have said, hey, we'll give you a 2-year contract, take a few months off, rest your weary mind, and then we'll keep you in developmental to get you back in the ring and you don't get rusty and you don't get, you still learn. I would have had him come back and fucking apologize to everybody and blame Daivari. Because Daivari, if they were keeping him, he could have been a heck of a heel. This is a son of a bitch. I was so depressed and I was all lost to this fucking guy.
I listened to you.
Like I joined the Manson family.
Yeah.
And then because just for that, and our fans, who many of them knew him and, they would have accepted that. And then you just kind of see where he goes. Let's see how long can his hair get so he doesn't look like that guy. And let's see what he looks like clean shaven and what different kind of gear and colors can we put him in some fluorescent spandex, anything that's the opposite of what he was wearing. Just see what else that he could look like different and see where he goes at that point. That's what I would have done. But you never know. Maybe Rip Rogers was there then. Rip Rogers could have given Mark Magnus his old gimmick when he first went to work for Nick Goulas. You remember that?
Which one?
The Disco Kid.
Oh, that's right.
1978. And Rip Rogers, Mark Shera, is like a rookie, and he gets booked out of Indiana. Bruiser sent him to work for Nick Goulas, and they made him, because disco was hot, they made him the Disco Kid. And he had a fucking set of headphones that used to, remember the headphones you'd have to plug into your turntable or your receiver. You had to plug them in, right? They didn't have wireless headphones back then. But he would goddamn come out with headphones on and they'd play the music and it'd be like he's fucking dancing to it. He was trying to disco dance. It didn't last long, the Disco Kid, but it was the summer of 78. And it's the summer of 2025, Brian. And the summer is a time to be out and about, enjoying every moment from sunup to sundown. But you know what that means when you're outside? That means you need something that runs on battery power to stay up on everything, the podcast and the music and the severe weather warnings. And you can't just walk around like the Disco Kid in 1978 with headphones on, not plugged into anything. Well, people would put you, they'd throw a net over you. You know what you got to do, don't you, Brian? And by now you have to know what you got to do this summer to stay up on everything, what you got to stick inside your head.
Of course, you're talking about those great Raycon earbuds.
That's what I was talking about, the everyday earbuds. You know why they call them that? Because you got to wear them every day. As a matter of fact, they keep track of these. They have a special sensor. It tells whether you're with body heat, whether you're wearing them or not. If you don't wear them every day, you're penalized. The next time you put them in, you're going to get a short, sharp shock. Boom, it tells you, don't fuck with your everyday earbud schedule from now on. Every day or elsewise, you're going to get zapped. Because Raycon's latest model is better than ever for the summertime when the feeling is easy. With a 32-hour battery life and the multi-point connectivity, you can pair up with all kinds of, you can pair two devices at once, Brian. That means with this thing, when you got your everyday earbuds in, let's say you go to the park, you see a good-looking young lady. She's listening to earbuds. You can walk up within 50 feet of her and punch a button and pair up with her shit and listen to what she's listening to.
No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. Let's not tell people that's how it works, because that's not how it works.
If you take the earbud out of the left side of your head, your left ear, and you speak into it, she'll be able to hear your voice.
Again, none of this is how it works. Let's just focus on how it works.
You can beam suggestive phone calls into these people's heads. Just the heavy breathing alone will drive them crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can't do any of these things, but what you can do is hear the finest tunes, the greatest podcast, great audio with Raycon everyday earbuds. Take them with you wherever you go every day, and just do that.
And just whisper into the one, just say, hi, what are you wearing? Because Raycon start at just half the price of other premium audio brands, and they come in a spectrum, Brian, a spectrum. That's a spectrum is a literal array, a plethora, a cornucopia of vibrant colors to match your summer vibe. Does that mean they vibrate too? So when you punch the button for the noise cancellation, does that mean they stop vibrating, these vibrant colors?
There's no vibration, but there are
it'll help your ears.
Your healthy ears help. Did you say healthy ears? Helpful ears? Did you say helpful ears?
It'll help your ears reduce their stress, this vibrator.
That's right.
You turn this vibrator on in your ears and stress release happens in about 5 to 7 minutes.
There is no vibration except for the natural, or is it natural? But the sounds of the bass and wherever you're listening to.
And then the colors are vibrant. I don't know what colors do. They have red? I'm not sure.
Let's focus on the fact that Raycon has vibrant colors, the fact that Raycon has great audio, the fact that you can listen to whatever you want, wherever you want to go. Great battery, great
quick charge function. 10 minutes of charging, you're going to get 90 minutes of battery. They got that. And half the price, did I mention that, of the other premium audio brands? The active noise cancellation alone, that's up on the tip top of the accessible price points there with everybody else. They've got it. They got you all covered. You can listen to anything you dadgum well want to and just have that look on your face when people are staring at you, bopping your head or nodding and agreeing or shaking your head in disgust. They'll go, well, that son of a bitch is ready for a rubber room at the puzzle factory. But no, it's just because you have the Raycon earbuds in your head, and we're going to put in your head a way that you can put more money in your pocket. Because if you go right now to buy Raycon, BUYRAYCON
Raycon.com/JCE, you're going to get 15% off Raycon's best-selling everyday earbuds. 15% off, not like less than, not up to, but a whole, solid, complete, unadulterated 15% off the everyday earbuds by Raycon.com/JCE. Stacy's always getting these things. They don't wear out. She loses them because she goes out in the backyard. She gets on the swing set and she's swinging amongst the trees.
The swing set.
She is so, and then she'll get some more. And then we see the raccoons in the trees that are bopping to the sounds and the tunes. And they're listening to us, Brian. You know, we have more raccoons listening to you and I on this show than any other podcast in America today. They're all in my backyard. They're agreeing with us, everything we say, and that you will too. You'll agree that the Raycon everyday earbuds are the things you need to listen to for the music, the podcasts, the warnings of impending doom. You can tune into DEF CON on these things, can't you? I see
hear
now
that tone?
that
Jim, you hear that tone? That means we got to wrap it up.
I hear that tone. That means that the Academy, I'd like to thank the Academy. Buy Raycon.com/JCE, 15% off.
All right, it's your show. We're back. Raycon, good friends of ours. Get them, support them, do your thing.
Get them, support them.
/JCE. But Jim,
get even with them.
That's right.